My grandmother on her small kindergarten teacher salary that she retired under after 30 years, that was her career, and she raised 3 kids and put all 3 through college. She was a multi-millionaire, and she had a Warren Buffett principle. She said, "I invest in stocks, that I understand. I understand men, and as long as there are, at that time, cigarettes, whiskey, cigars," she said, "they're gonna do well." So she invested in those. She picked her stocks based on things she understood, and she did quite well with it. I always knew that if you can do that on a kindergarten teacher's salary, why couldn't I?
So you founded two companies, you took a startup through an IPO, and you come from a family of realtors and real estate investors. What was the number one factor that's really helped you grow your wealth over your life? Today, I'm here with Ruth Smith. And Ruth, this is a very special episode that I'm excited for. You are the first ever millionaire that I get to interview on the podcast. So thank you so much for joining me.
I'm glad to be here, and that feels odd to be referred to as a millionaire, but it's true. And I didn't think about it until I started reading your post. And, we've talked about retirement and what it meant to retire. And I realized, wait, that applies to us. So, yeah, so I'm excited to be here to talk about it.
That's awesome. And before we jump in, I've got some questions. I'm curious to know more about your story. But before we do that, do you mind just giving the audience a quick introduction as to who you are?
Yes, I'm Ruth Smith. Currently, I'm a career coach for tech executives. I work with senior to mid level tech entrepreneurs and people who are W 2s to help them find their next challenging role. I've spent my entire career, 30 plus years, in STEM, and I've been a two-time founder of 2 companies, and I'm currently self-employed through my career coaching business, but I've been with, several Fortune 500 companies and also 4 high growth startups, and I love that space especially. And I decided to take all of my experience mentoring people. I've owned staffing companies. I've worked in sales for staffing companies, and I've worked for core engineering companies. And I wanted to use all of that experience to help people in this particular market, which I found has changed tremendously after going through my first layoff at the end of 23. And I found it entirely difficult to find, another role, and I wanted to use all my experience to help others, so that's what I'm doing today.
Wow, very impressive resume. Honestly, I feel honored to be able to talk to you today and really tap into some of the wisdom you have. So clearly, you've had lots of success in the past with your own companies, working in the corporate world as well. How did you get your start?
Well, I my first job out of college was, working as a software engineer for a company here in Nashville. I live in the Nashville, Tennessee area. I didn't know it at the time, but I would end up spending my entire career here, but it's been an amazing city to be a part of. I like to joke, I came to Nashville before Nashville was cool, and, I've been through all the ups and downs of this city that I've come to love. But I've been, as I said, a software engineer, a product manager. I've held many senior level engineering titles. I mentioned I've started 2 companies, and, I love working with high growth startups because you get to wear a lot of different hats, and I always tell people that I feel like you 10x your skills by working for startups because you have to do everything, and the learning curve is very steep. But, I've enjoyed my experience at both, and, but every facet of my career has been spent in technology. I've never really been out of that space.
Wow. Okay. So you've worked at several startups. What would you say has been maybe the role where you learned the most or the role that really accelerated your career the most?
That would have been my first high growth startup company. I'd been with 3, Fortune 500 companies, like Bridgestone Americas. I'd worked for the government, safest job you can have, not
Yeah.
anymore. And I worked for, Hospital Corporation America, and while those Fortune 500 companies were really good to me and I grew my skills, I landed at this startup and just immediately, they started giving me tasks and responsibilities to handle, and I had 4 different leadership roles in that company. I got to be there while we took the company public. I was also there when we sold the company in a private sale. We took it back private again, and I worked with a lot of mergers and acquisitions, because we grew through that kind of growth, and they let me participate in every stage of the growth of that company. And that's my favorite company because I still have strong relationships with all of the friends that I met. We were all early to mid 20 somethings when we started with that company. And now we're all married. We've put our kids through college, and some are grandparents now, but we still get together regularly for lunches, for dinners, and to hang out. And there probably isn't a week that goes by that I don't talk to someone that I had a relationship with at that company at that time, so it really was a real career growth accelerator for me.
Wow, being part of an IPO on the ground floor and making lifelong friends, that sounds kinda like the dream right there.
Yeah, it was a dream. I've never had another one like it. But if you ask any of us that worked there, we all will tell you that was our favorite job ever.
What was the company?
Private Business Incorporated. It was a fintech company, and we made accounts receivable software for the banking industry. The company started from just a small software company, out of Des Moines, Iowa, actually, and
Wow.
some partners in Nashville bought the software rights and continued to grow it, and then we had a complete revamp of the product, like I said before, they took the company public, and then it was sold, and now the core of that company is owned by a company called Jack Henry& and Associates, which is the largest banking software company in the world. They make virtually every product that runs banks in this country.
Wow, okay, don't sleep on Des Moines, Iowa, that's
No,
what I
no. The big things happen in Des Moines.
that's awesome. Okay, so, as we're looking at your, financial picture as an individual, what was the number one factor that's really helped you grow your wealth over your life? Was it, maybe equity that you gained working for a startup? Was it real estate? What's been like that big thing that has really helped move the needle for you?
Okay, you're probably not gonna be ready for this or your audience. It was starting early, and from my very first job I actually graduated college when I was 21. So, from my very first job, I realized that, retirement plans and things like that were a thing of the past. And so I began investing in my 401k, immediately at 21, and I always invested in 401k, and I put at least the matching principal in and as much as I could. My husband, we didn't meet or marry until we were in our 30s, and so he had pretty much done the same. But I think it's really, if you think of it as that dollar cost averaging and that compounding principle over time of putting it in good high growth stocks. And, income grew and we went through my career and his career, we also maxed out Roth IRAs on top of that. And then sometimes we made too much money to participate in Roth, but always we gave a little extra above that just towards additional mutual fund investments. So it's really kind of boring that we always took a portion of our money out to plan for our future, and we never saw it, we never looked at it, we never touched it, we didn't fret over it. And you look up one day and you're like, wow, look how much our portfolio has grown. And of course, it hasn't hurt that stocks have done really well. There's been real seasons. The 90s were huge for stocks. And also, I'd say, in the past 4 or 5 years, we've seen another big surge in stock prices. So that really helped. We didn't get into real estate till much later. It's funny because I'm from a real estate family. Both my parents were realtors. My sister was a realtor, and I've always loved it, and so we didn't start doing that till later, but that really has, helped us as well.
Okay. I just need a second to let my brain wrap around this because it's like extremely validating but also shocking. So you founded two companies. you took a startup through an IPO, and you come from a family of realtors and real estate investors. And the number one factor for growing your wealth has been dollar cost averaging into a 401k.
Yes, I know it seems boring and it's not sexy, but, this is really the reason I know anyone can do it, and I have to tell you, I have one of the greatest inspirations in this area, and that was my grandmother. My maternal grandmother was a widow at 36, and she had 3 young children. She never remarried, and she was a widow in the 30s, so imagine what life was like then. It was right around the Great Depression, it was tough. Women didn't typically, have careers or they had small jobs outside the home, but, being from an immigrant family, they were all college educated, all the females as well, and so she was a kindergarten teacher, and when my grandfather passed away, his law partner took her under his wing and taught her about finances and how to run the family finances, and he talked to her about investing in stocks, and so my grandmother on her small kindergarten teacher salary that she retired under after 30 years, that was her career, and she raised 3 kids and put all 3 through college and some through law school. She was a multi-millionaire, and she had a she had a Warren Buffett principle, and she said, "I invest in stocks, that I understand," and she said, "I understand men, and as long as there are" at that time, cigarettes, whiskey, cigars, she said, "They're gonna do well." So, she invested in those and also Nabisco when it was going through a lot of growth, and she picked her stocks based on things she understood, and she did quite well with it. So I always knew that if you can do that on a kindergarten teacher's salary, she probably never made over 50,000 in her career, I'm guessing, that if she could do it in a really simple way, why couldn't I?
Wow. Okay, no excuses for the rest of us. That's incredible. Single mom, 3 kids, put them all through college, investing in whiskey and tobacco.
Yep.
Well, she knows people's vices well.
Yes. Yeah, she did.
That's awesome. Going back to you, at what age did you first become a millionaire?
Okay, because you had a post out with that question, I think last week.
Yeah.
And I had to think back, and I feel like when we kinda crossed the line, it was probably our mid-40s. And I hadn't really consciously thought about it because, our retirement investments are sort of out of sight, out of mind, and that's not 100% true in terms of we do look at it. We have a financial advisor now. I did all of our investing for the first 15 years, and finally, I decided it was too much, and I wanted to hand it over to somebody to manage for us. And, obviously, we have regular checkups, with him and I feel like though that it was probably mid-40s that we could really could see incrementally where our whole portfolio was, and, it's kind of a joke every time we would go meet with our financial advisor. His name is Ivy, and my husband would always go, "Ivy, can I retire?" That's how we started every meeting, and he'd be like, "Well, let me show you guys." So he's like, "You guys are gonna be able to retire."
That's awesome. It's really good to have that professional perspective and reassurance too. I mean, we probably won't get into this too much, but a lot of times for people like you who are really successful, the hardest thing is knowing when to spend your money and how much, not whether you're going to be able to retire.
Well, no, that's a whole different question. I've kinda struggled because I mean, I didn't grow up in a well-to-do family. I mean, my parents did fine, but there's 5 kids in our family, and they were in real estate, starting back to the '70s, and if you know anything about real estate then, people cannot believe this, but interest rates were hovering between 16 and 21%, and it was not an easy time to be in real estate, but they made a go of it and they managed to provide for us. But my biggest thing was I am never gonna be an entrepreneur. That is such a hard life. And I decided that I was gonna take the safe career and I majored in computer science. And my first job was working for the government. And I felt like it was safe and reliable, secure. I wonder how many people think that now, but benefits were abundant, and I thought that's really the pinnacle. And about a year in, I thought this work is soul sucking. I thought I am going to have to someone's going to have to die or retire before I get a chance here. And I knew then that I couldn't stick it out. I had to have another job. And I realized later why my parents became entrepreneurs, and I kinda had that in me to do that, even though I've spent only about a quarter of my life as an entrepreneur, the other parts have been a W-2, but I just, I feel like it's really important to, um, kinda listen to yourself and be true to who you are, and, um, like I said, just it's the boring things that you don't have to be overly complicated in your approach.
Yeah. Okay. So listen to yourself, be true to who you are, and find that job that really aligns with what gives you energy. That's what I'm hearing you say.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. What would you say is your biggest financial regret?
I would say not investing in real estate sooner. And it doesn't have to be real estate, but I give this advice regularly and people ask me. I say diversify your income. And whether if you can create another income stream by starting a side hustle, by investing in real estate, maybe buying a small business, but something that gives you residual income. It doesn't have to replace your income overnight, but I wish I had started with other sources of income sooner in my career. And of course, the real estate is that for us. And I wish I had invested and bought more property sooner. I'm thrilled. We only have one investment property right now. We bought a lake home also in 21 that right now we don't plan on renting out. We may later, but part of it's because we're doing some renovations on it now. And we want to wait, but our first property has done really well. It's not bad that it's in the Nashville market because if anybody knows anything about real estate here, has exploded over the past 10 years, and so it's been a really good investment for us. And we've had, really good renters, we've made good money off of that property, and that's when I'm like, "Man, I wish we had more," but that's I would say in I would create secondary sources of income sooner. That's what I would recommend.
That is great advice. And actually, I'm going to ask for your direct advice here. So, my wife and I, we lived in Raleigh. We recently moved to Arkansas. And instead of selling our house in Raleigh when we moved, we converted it into a rental property. So, we've got a tenant living there now. It's our first venture into rental properties and real estate. What advice would you give to someone like me who's a brand new real estate investor?
Well, I would just make sure that you can make good returns on it. I would imagine for you that, you guys, because it's long distance, that you have, a company who's managing the property for you. And some people need to do that anyway. I would say my husband and I are very different because, 1, he's very handy, like, he can fix and repair anything, and we're 10 minutes from our property, so we don't outsource that. If I were in another state, I definitely would do that, but I would look at your margins and make sure you're making a healthy margin. You need to make sure that you have enough income put back because things go wrong. I think I saw on one of your posts where the oven door shattered, and that same thing happened at my sister's place. I would say appliances don't seem to last more than a couple of years now, and so you just gotta just like your regular home, you gotta have enough money put back for the incidentals if something goes out. Also, it's really important that you get high quality tenants in there. You want people to take care of your place, you want people who will pay on time, and so that requires doing your homework on the tenants and making sure they have a good, payment and credit history and certainly don't have any illegal things going on. But and also, making sure that you can clear good margins on it. I like to say I love to create a 10 to 15% margin. Some people go lower and that's totally, up to you. But and if it's a headache, don't do it. I know some people are just drained by being landlords, and if it's not fun for you, then maybe real estate's not your investing game, and that's okay.
Yeah, really going back to that theme of what you said of pursue what gives you energy, and if real estate doesn't give you energy, there's plenty of other avenues. It's funny that you mentioned that story about the oven exploding because, my wife and I for like a whole week had barely gotten any sleep, packing up the house, moving across the country. It's like the second day our tenant has moved into the property and the oven door just literally explodes on us. And we're like, okay.
Okay, that's life, and, that's a real picture, so the audience needs to realize that's what it's like to be a property owner for when you lease out property. It never happens at a convenient time. Your tenant, your thing floods when you're out of the country and you can't deal with it, or like you said, you're moving your own home, and it never is convenient. So if you don't deal well with stress, it's probably not best to have rental properties or have somebody totally manage the property for you and don't worry about it.
Yeah, our property manager's been great for us.
Good.
So, how would you say that your view of money has changed over time?
Money equals freedom to me. And this is when I first realized it. Well, number 1, I've always known that having a good margin, I've always tried to pay cash for everything. I did that, my husband did that before we married. We were kind of that same mindset, but we paid off our primary home in 7 years. Um, and it was really a process. We didn't set out to do that initially. So short story, I told you we got married in our 30s. So we both had lived independently, had our own careers. We got married. I like to tell people we lived kind of as roommates because we divvied up the bills and he paid half, I paid half. And we talked about, we need to combine our finances, and we talked about it a lot, and I didn't really mistrust him, but we had been single so long, we just were used to kinda operating our vein, so we kept we kept talking about, "Okay, well, let's get a joint, checking account, and we'll put everything together," and we opened one up, and we never moved our funds over. And so a year later, another opportunity came through my employer. I mentioned I work for a banking company, and so we got free checking and banking and everything. So we said, let's do it again. And so I got all of my check transferred in there and had it automatically deposit, but my husband didn't. And so I said, well, what is up with this? And so he said, well, I want to talk about that. He said, I'm afraid if we combine our finances that you're going to micromanage every dollar that I spend, and he said, "I don't wanna do that." And I said, "Okay, let's talk about that then." He said, "You're the kind that balances to the budget, to the checking account, to the T every month. I don't do that. I just have a cushion in there. I know I'm good. I don't worry about it." So, we reached a compromise that I would be the one to pay the bills and manage the finances, and that we would talk about it every 2 weeks. So, I spent 3 months tracking all of our expenses. And I came to him and I said, "This is crazy. We have so much money left at the end of the month that we didn't know until we combined." And I said, "I know you were saving, I was saving, but we could really be saving." But what I'm thinking, I said, "What if we took that extra and put it towards, the principal on our loan and just try to pay down as quickly as we could?" He goes, "Let's do it." So we were putting 1,000, 2,000 a month towards just the principal and then our regular payment on top of that. We just got on that automatic treadmill, like I said, with investing, and we did it for about 3 years, and it was amazing how much it reduced our mortgage. And then I stopped work when our kids were young, and so we couldn't put that extra. But one day, I happened to notice that our balance was down to about 25 or $30,000, and my husband happened to have stock options, and they were always underwater. And so, but this particular batch, one batch was, like, above water, and for some weird reason, their stock quadrupled in 2 weeks, and it went from, like, 17 a share up to, like, 175 a share. So
Wow.
I told him, I said, "If we cashed out these stock options, we could pay off our house." And he goes, "I'm calling HR right now." So he cashed it out, and I went to the bank and paid off the rest of our balance of our house, and that's how we did it. So we laid in bed that night going, literally, one of us could work at Home Depot and pay all of our bills, and we'd be good. And it was a huge revelation to us that so every decision we made going forward, we just kinda weighed it out like, "Should we? Could we do this?" And it also motivated us to just continue to pay cash for things as we move through life. So, having that kind of money, it makes you look at decisions differently. It makes you take risk in your career. It makes you prioritize your family. It makes you decide if you wanna take a big trip. It makes you generous givers when you have opportunities to give to people and to do things that really resonate with your heart or to help people out that are not as fortunate. Sometimes life happens. It's no fault of our own. And, we've been able to help out friends and family in ways that we would have never imagined. And so it just gives us a lot more joy to realize it's not really ours. And we're grateful that we've been, gifted this money and we are stewards of it. And that's just how we view it in life.
Wow. What a great I'm not sure if you're Christian or not. It sounds like
Yeah,
you
I
oh,
am. We are. Yes. So we believe in tithing and, like I said, and we are able to give above and beyond tithe, to do things for other people and ministries that resonate with us. And, like I said, people that are in, hard circumstances and things like that, that we've been able to help out. It's been a real joy for us.
that is so refreshing to hear, and there's so many lessons for, people like me to pull out of that. I see a lot of advice online about, if you have a 3 or 4% mortgage, don't pay it off. And it sounds like there's a lot of intangible blessings that come from being debt free that's hard to quantify on a spreadsheet, like taking that big risk in your career to start your own company or being able to give more generously.
Yeah, you nailed it.
I'd love to finish here with one last question. What would you define as a good life?
Well, I think, I've kind of alluded to it, but living life on your terms. I think being able to put your family first. Um, I realized a long time ago, and my husband did too, because neither one of us came from wealth, that money does not buy happiness. It does not equate to that. And, I just think, your family, your friends, being able to set your own schedule, being able to make career decisions, and I've quit jobs twice and didn't have a role and anything to go to, but I knew we had a cushion and it was gonna be fine. And a lot of people, are not in that position. But I think, having not lived beyond our means, we've always lived on less than we made. And honestly, from the time we got married, we just made a pact that we would try to live on one income always. And so if we had the second income, we would use it for bigger things. And that way, if one of us wanted to shift careers or change or leave our jobs, it was possible. So it's just living a life of freedom, a lack of stress, and not having other people define your life for you has been a blessing.
Wow. Ruth, thank you so much for taking the time. I have honestly felt like a student in a classroom today, and it has been such a blessing for me to hear your story and to learn so much from you and all of the good choices that you've made. I feel like I've gained some real wisdom from our conversation, and I'm excited for everyone else to have an opportunity to hear it as well. So, thank you for being so generous and joining me today.
Well, thank you. And just so you know, I continue to learn from you. You're the one that gave me the money saving tips about the prepaid phone plans. And we've been going through and cutting so much money out of our monthly expenses. And it's due to you. I mean, you give great advice out there.
If you're feeling behind in your finances and aren't sure of the next step forward, reach out to me. I have a limited number of individual coaching spots available and would be happy to help you. Use the link in the description below to reserve your free consultation today. And I know you're doing a lot of great work with career coaching. Where can people find you? Where can they contact you? How can they follow you?
Well, they can find me on LinkedIn under Ruth Smith. And also, I have a website, ruthsmithcoaching.com, if you want to reach out to me there.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, if you're looking to make a transition in your career, Ruth is the woman to go to, so go check her out. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to the show for more episodes like this one.